see that.
So you saying this was on?
Stay right there.
Okay.
You know what you gotta do that? Ask some good questions.
If I can interrupt y'all for a minute.
Ask some good questions for us. Difficult questions.
Let me just start by thanking you again for taking the time to come out. Oh, Farrell, he knows more about this than I do.
Okay, go ahead.
We wanted to take the opportunity to be consistent with one of the commitments we made, I guess, 2 meetings ago, to try to get together at least once a month and give you current status, what we're working on, give you the opportunity to fire off any questions or express any concerns. Tonight we've got a whole host of our team members here to address any questions. I know you had a public meeting down in Napoleonville last week, and we were not available. I was on vacation, Bruce had another commitment, so we'd like to make ourselves available tonight for any questions that may have come out of that meeting, okay? But I'd like to ask of you, if you think that getting together every month is getting to be a burden, let us know. You know, we want to do this to provide information, but we don't want it to become a problem for you. Okay? We don't have a problem doing it, but there's no sense in doing it if we're not getting anything out of it. So please don't hesitate to say, look, I've heard enough. I can probably make it for 6 weeks or something like that. Okay? So let me just start off with a quick rundown of the highlights, and then if y'all will refrain, and then when we get through the highlights, we'll kind of come back around with the whole team here and answer any specific questions that you have. ORW 31 or rather 38 and 21, of course, those were the 2 target wells that we dedicated for small volume water withdrawal in an attempt to see if we could enhance gas production. We completed our testing on ORW 38, and we're in our 22nd day now on ORW 21. The results on 38 were pretty much negligible, no appreciable gas production. What we've seen in 21 is about 1,000 cubic feet over a 22-day period. That's probably negligible too. It's not really a volume of gas that you want to pursue with any kind of long-term plan. Now, we've got other wells that we're currently testing away from the community. We originally had a few that were behind this row of homes over here that we were going to go through the same process with, not quite as detailed, but at least a water withdrawal process to see if we could augment gas flow. We decided not to do that. There were concerns about the potential for subsidence, so we abandoned our plans to do those that are closest, but we moved further over onto our property toward the sinkhole, and that's a work in progress today. And I will tell you from preliminary results, we're still not seeing the kind of response that we had hoped to see, and the kind of response that we got from OGWR1, which is one of the very first relief wells that's over on our facility, where when we started pulling small amounts of water out of that well, we started to almost double the gas flow. And so that's really the reason that we're going through this series of tests, is to see if we can enhance gas flow from wells that have been marginal performers, or maybe even wells that have been good performers, but by pulling a little bit of water out, we can enhance that flow. And once again, I'll reiterate our commitment to you all, is that we have no plans to come into the community and pull large volumes of water out that could induce subsidence on your properties. That remains our commitment. Okay? Now, I understand from comments made last week that there's still some interest in pursuing that. And we're certainly interested in doing it too, but we don't want to do it against your will, and we don't want to do it to the extent that we could damage your property. There's no sense in making a problem worse trying to solve a problem. So that's our position, and we hold steady on that. So the testing continues. We'll have some results. I think I can tell you confidently now that preliminarily we haven't from the wells that we pulled water from, we haven't seen anything similar to OGRW1. And in fact, most cases we've seen no appreciable increase in gas. Okay? To go back to 38 and 21, no indication of subsidence resulting from the water volumes that we pulled out of the ground on those 2 wells. I think on 38 we pulled somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000, 60,000 gallons, and with 21 we would exceed that.
Oh yeah.
Because we're going for almost a whole month. Okay. VC2. The VC2 has been kind of a mystery to us, but I wanted to give Charlie the opportunity to talk a little bit about its history, because it behaved strangely. This was one of the very first relief wells that was installed.
Pressure monitor.
pressure monitor well, I'm sorry. And we were monitoring it. We had it trapped. We had it shut in. And for the longest time, it was giving us a pressure. And over the course of about a 4 or 5 day period, that pressure started to drop off. And then on one day, it just suddenly fell completely off. And what we discovered was there was a small leak, small valve leak. And in the process of replacing that valve, it had to be opened up and depressured. And what's been perplexing about that well is ever since that happened, it hasn't regained any pressure. So it went from about 51 pounds down to about 3 pounds, and it's remained there. And that was sort of our inspiration. That and what we saw with bubble site 56, where we put a passive vent well in the water out there and for the most part killed the bubble site. Those two events were our inspiration for coming in and putting passive vent wells along the bayou and bubble sites to see if we could strategically go in and kill bubble sites. So I know there's been interest in it. Have I completed the story?
You captured it. I mean, it was 55, 56 PSI early on, and then it was decreasing, you know, over several months. And then when we were doing the ORW38 dewatering test, we had, I think we replaced an instrument on the wellhead, and might have had a little leak in that, and maybe a leak in the valve, but it was over a 1 day period, and so it basically went to zero. And so that's it in a nutshell.
That's where it remains. So,
Where is that one located?
EC2 is
1460 South Cotton, the Works property.
Near ORW38.
Right in the back.
yeah. And for the longest time, it was a well that we were all looking to. It was kind of the beacon that was telling us whether we were making progress in depleting gas and knocking down pressures on the top of the MRA. Well, it turns out it must have been a pretty small volume of gas in there, because once it released, it just went away. So, like I said last time we met, strange, but still a good thing. It's a positive sign. Okay, so on the topic of passive vent wells, as you all know, we came into the community and we installed 4 new ones. No, converted 2 DPVE wells. We installed 3 new, and then we had the number 6 well, 6th well up at both sides. 6. 2 of those 6 wells turned out to be productive. The one at bubble site 56 had success in killing the bubble site, at least initially. We think we still have some gas there, obviously, because you can shut the passive well in and a little bit of bubbling comes back. It's not in the same location, and we don't think it's of the same magnitude, but there's still some gas coming up through that well. When you shut it in, it comes back in the form of bubbles. When you open the well back up, the bubbling goes away. So it's really doing what it was intended to do, so we're not going to plug that well. But the others we're going to go ahead and plug. Okay. That one, and passive well number 3, which is down in the neighborhood, and had a trace amount of biogenic H2S in it. It produced a little bit of gas, but essentially went away. So there's just not enough evidence to support the installation of additional passive vent wells. Certainly not in the community. So what we may do, and what we want to do, but it's currently on hold because we're still analyzing information from bubble site 56, is we want to come back and install some more, and like I said, go after specific bubble sites in the bayou and see if we can kill, similar to what happened at 56. So that's a work in progress. So to wrap up the whole passive vent wells, you can look for activity going on this week, and we'll probably be finished by this time next week. We'll have all of the wells plugged except for the one over at bubble site 56. Okay. Now here's another perplexing situation. Oxygeismer 3A, the re-entry well. You know, for the last month, certainly the last 2 times we've been together, we talked about the tagging of sediment in the cavern and its proximity to the roof of the cavern. Of course, we were pretty excited about that. That's a good thing. We're close to completion. I mean, at least the cavern is almost full, 99% full. Last Friday, we went in and did our routine 2-week frequency logging and tagged 350 feet deeper. So now we suspect that either there was some kind of massive movement, which seems highly unlikely because there wasn't any indication on any of the seismic instruments that volume of material moved. But it is still a possibility. Second possibility is we've been wrong in our tagging up near the roof. Throughout this entire event where we've gone in and tagged, we've recognized that it's been extremely difficult to drop a tool down in that material and hit something and say, okay, that's the top of the material. And I think part of the reason is it's been very dynamic. It's been mixed up and stirred up. And I think when it gets in that condition, the liquid component above the sediment slurries up and becomes almost like a thick mud. I think there's also the possibility that there are suspended debris clusters that might be allowing a tool to sit down. So basically what this situation confirms that our ability to go in and tag fill is still questionable. It's never been absolute.
What's the pressure in the well?
Pressure is
In
currently
the cavern?
trending back up. I can't tell you the casing seat pressure. I don't have it off the top of my head, but from the prow log, what was the casing seat pressure? Does anybody know? It would be in Ryan's email.
1945.
Yeah,
1945, yeah.
1940.
Which is down a little bit and not quite as high as it
So
was.
it's 1945 PSI.
Right, at the approximate elevation of the casing seat, which still puts it below 0.8 psi grade.
So the weight is going by means of a cable down through 1900 plus pounds. That, of course, says it's got to go through some kind of packing.
Right.
Is the cable could the cable be getting at different times with different operators, get hung up on the packing?
You're asking the same questions that we've asked of our vendors, and we have two, a petroleum engineer, and of course, Joel Warnicke, Dr. Warnicke, he's kind of led that process. When this came up Friday, he was covered up with emails from all of us asking those type of questions. And certainly that's a possibility. It could be something as simple as an inexperienced operator on the wireline crew that didn't have past experience. But from what I understand, it's a delicate process. It's a matter of dropping the tool down and watching the weight indicator. And as you roll out more wireline, your weight goes up. And then when you land on something where the tool stops, the rate of increase will stop, or it will slow down. And then you spool off a little bit more wire, and then you start to roll it back up, and you look for the point where the weight indicator jumps up, because now it's picking the tool back up. And what they do is they'll drop into the well, they'll measure, they'll zero in on the casing seat and correct their depth and make sure they know where the tool is, and then they'll go down and make 3, 4, maybe 5 attempts to go down and lose weight on the tool. And then they take those depths and they take an average of it and say, that's where the bottom is. It's one of those crazy things out here.
Okay, so it involves a certain amount of skill to be able to.
Skill and experience. We use the same Baker wireline crew. We have the same people from our team in the logging truck. The only thing that's been different has been lubricator, the pack-off company.
Is it a slip on or electric line?
It's electric.
If it's a slip on, you're not catching packing like you talking about.
Yeah.
And be a little more sensitive.
Yeah. The reason we're not using a slip line is we need those conductors for the tools that we're running. We're running a pretty sophisticated downhole pressure bond tool and a density tool. If it was just a matter of dropping a sinker bar in, and watching the weight indicator and watching the depth, then we could get by with the sinker or with the slip line and not have to deal with that so much. But I've seen cases where slip lines can get hauled up too.
Oh, yeah.
In the lines.
Electric line is a lot more.
Yeah, it's a lot like the surveying that we do on the sinkhole. You can do it and walk away with a figure, and you have to realize there's a certain plus or minus, a certain range of uncertainty. But every time you do it, you start to build a record, and then that record develops into a trend, and it narrows that range of uncertainty. The same thing kind of holds true for the tagging of the TD. But for the life of me, I can't explain how it could have possibly moved down 350 feet. I think we probably were wrong in interpreting that it was up near the roof.
Would it be possible that they are accurate and that we're losing material through the aquifer or some other means?
I would rule nothing out here.
That
I would rule nothing out, but I'll tell you that is a massive volume of material. I mean, 350 feet in this cavern probably equals somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 3 million barrels. That's a big chunk of stuff. And for it to just move away, go away in a 2-week period would have created something that we would have detected. I mean, we've got seismograph, or seismometers out there, we've got water level indicators on the sinkhole, and as you all know, this thing's behaving like a U-tube. Something can happen over here on the sinkhole, and we can see it on the cavern. Well, there just hasn't been anything dramatic that would suggest that kind of event occurred. Not saying it's not possible, but time will tell. We're not going to step away from the logging process. We'll be back out here next Friday. And I'm going to have my butt in the logging truck so I can watch everything that goes on and sort of back check what the guys are doing, just to make sure that they're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. So that's a bit of bad news from our perspective, because like I said, we were looking at the relative calm and the seismicity, and we were looking at those tagging depths up near the roof as positive signs that this thing has run its course. You know, it's filled up. The seismic record would suggest that there's not any big massive volumes of material that are still falling down. Well, even though that still may hold true, we now have this uncertainty about that 350 feet in the roof. So we're just going to have to keep watching. The good news is the seismicity remains flat. It's been late December since we've had any significant amount of seismicity. So I think that's a positive development. What we're seeing now is what we call background seismic activity, and this is located. We can actually locate events that are near active brine production wells. And from the experience of the guys that we hired to help us build this network, they've got a couple of decades doing this over in Europe because it's required over there. They're telling us this is natural. When you're solution mining salt, the salt, every ton that you move out, you remove load from the salt and it dilates. It basically expands a little bit. And sometimes it can crack or fracture and make a little bit of seismic energy. And that's what we think is being picked up now from the instruments that we have. Still some shallow MEQs occasionally picked up around the sinkhole, which is to be expected. I would think that at any given time, you know, we might have a 20 or 30 foot piece of this clay material that's up top that has a steep boundary. It could slough off. There's still some of that that's possible, but there's not anything that would suggest that there's any gross consumption of material taking place out in the middle. And the changes that we're seeing in the tagging or the sounding of the bottom of the sinkhole are pretty consistent. I think the latest were 220, 230 feet. The last time we met, it was around 200. The time before, it was around 180. So, you know, there's still some things going on. I believe that compaction is probably driving most of what's going on right now. Compaction may be what caused this change in the tagging of the solids in the cavern. It may be compaction, and it may be the fact that the suspended material had time to settle out. If you take a brine and you mud it up with solids, clay, you can bulk it up to the extent that the tool doesn't go through it very easily. If you give it time to settle down and settle out, it becomes more like brine water, then that tool can go through it. So I think that's a possibility. But in any event, we're going to keep monitoring.
Can you confirm on camera for this armchair expert up in Kentucky that Texas Brine is not using sinkhole waters to brine? Because that's his theory of this cavern dropping.
Yes.
And he has people believing it.
Yeah, that's confirmed.
We're using the same water wells we used before the sinkhole formed, and
Not the sinkhole.
not the sinkhole.
Now, this is a Kentuckian that's making these kind of claims.
Yeah. That's never been down here since this all started.
If you read all the crap, you exactly.
We report all the water that we use to DNR and which wells it comes from.
So it's all reported, and
It's all reported.
I'm just hoping if he hears it himself, you know, he'll
Just a couple
stop
other
saying that.
developments. As you all know, we own several homes down on Sportsman in an effort to reduce our costs. To be honest with you, like anybody else, we're trying to contain our costs. And also to get folks further integrated into the community, we thought we'd take advantage of having those homes and moving some of our people in. And that's a process that we're continuing. And I can give you my firm assurances these are good people. Half of them standing right here. Charlie Burton, he's a solid guy. The other thing is Charlie's ever,
To me, it would be nice to have them come up so we know who would they look like.
Charlie and,
Yeah, I'm in,
Neil's not here right now, but Charlie's, you wanna tell him where you're from?
Chattanooga, Tennessee, so I've been working on the response for about 8 months.
What home do you live in?
So, what home do I live in? It's 133.
Danny's house.
Oh,
Danny's
oh.
up there.
So I've been there for a
Across the
week.
street from me.
My counterpart, Neil Strickland, he was there for a couple weeks, so we rotate out every 2 weeks. So, that's,
You did background checks?
Charlie, the only thing Charlie's ever been arrested for was singing too loud in church. Did about a week probation for that. No.
I can answer any questions you want about me personally. I mean, I've got 3 kids, I'm married 25 years, a couple weeks ago, so.
If I moved in, and then you got concerns.
You would have, it's not the idea of moving. You would have concerns.
Get a target on my back.
Friday night.
It's not the idea of moving, it's the idea of he's between us.
Yeah.
I have nothing against
You know-
anybody, but hey, look, I'm moving in, I'm with so-and-so,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be your neighbor now. When you see me, you'll know who I am. That's what.
I get that, we get that, and it's part of the cultural differences of where we're from. I mean, I can't tell you two things about the neighbor that lives 2 streets down from me.
You don't know by now how close we are down
I
this
know that now,
neighborhood?
know that now. Yeah.
We're not an ordinary neighborhood, so you can't go by where you live or whatever. This neighborhood is close knit and we wanna know everything.
Right, well, this is one guy, Neil will be the other.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, Mike, you all have known Mike. Mike's been living in.
I've been living on the north side of 70 since January of last year. And I can vouch for Neil Strickland, Charlie's counterpart. I've known Neil for 10 years, and his arrest record is even smaller than Charlie's. Yeah.
Okay.
We do have Paul Scott, will be moving into the Cusho property here sometime in early April. He's not here on site currently, but as I mentioned at Mr. Leader's house, he's the other person that'll be moving in one of the houses, and that'll be sometime in early to mid-April. And when he's back on site for the project, we'll get him around, introduce him as well.
And Paul's bringing his wife, if I'm
Yeah,
not mistaken,
I believe
right?
so.
Paul's the site manager for Tetra Tech, in case you haven't met him. He's been working here since pretty much Tetra Tech arrived.
Yeah, Paul's a really good stand-up guy too.
Yeah, I've met Paul on many occasions and talked to him, and I met his wife twice. Seem to be nice people.
Okay, so we think having these guys closer and hopefully with time you'll get to know a little better will help in terms of response and just awareness. I mean, I think any of them are available to answer questions if you see them in the streets. If there's any misbehavior, let us know. Root them out. Okay. The other component to that is we had plans, we thought that we might be successful in relocating this facility down to the Sanchez house down at the end. That's another one that we own. We actually came in and paved the parking lot. Found out after the decision was made and kind of started the process that there is a homeowners association. There are some codes that we have to look at. So we're in the process of looking at those codes right now and seeing if we can do that. Whether or not we actually do it, I don't know. But that's another little thing little adjustment that we're just trying to make. Okay. The only other thing I have to mention is the new south berm construction. It continues. We're on target to have it completed by the end of April. We're in the process now of coming back over the sand material that's been laid down, which gives us the primary containment. We're putting an impermeable fabric material over that, and then we'll build it up with clay, and ultimately come back and put a limestone cap on top of it. That work is, like I said, it's scheduled to be completed by the end of May. I've been out on it today, drive around it, and it looks good. The old south berm remains above water, so it's still providing some primary containment. Okay. I think I've hit on most everything that I wanted to talk to you about. I did mention though about the dissatisfied with this change in the fill on 3A. You know, it could be that we come back next Friday and find out that it's back up at the top, and then we start looking at, okay, what happened last Friday? Maybe something was wrong there. It's just a matter of getting a series of data points before we can finally say this is what we got. Statistical average. Okay. So even though that's not good news, the good news is the seismicity remains really quiet, really calm. And that spells stability. So, we're encouraged by that. Okay.
When the south berm, the new south berm is complete, the old berm that's there, it's gonna stay there or be an attempt to remove it or just leave it there?
We'll leave it there. We don't have any current plans to come in and take it out at the moment. We've considered what will happen ultimately, you know, with all the berms.
Yeah.
We pondered what kind of circumstances that we may be facing at that time. It's hard to say what will end up there. I mean, it could be that portion remains stable and just don't know. We might be able to
If
remove
it
it.
subsides, well, that's more sand going down to the bottom of the hole to fill it in.
More material to fill it.
Now, what about the pipelines that cross the sinkhole? I understand there's been a decision made to cut them and abandon in place.
Right. Bruce or Mike, you guys want to?
Well, all the pipeline companies that currently own those pipelines they're all rerouting their pipelines.
Right.
Their plans that they've shared with us is when they get through rerouting their pipelines, they're gonna take those crews and come out and either cut and cap the pipelines or turn them over to Texas Brine. So they haven't told us, they haven't shared their plans with us. As a contingency, we've made plans to P&A those pipelines ourselves when and if we become owners of them. So that's the plan. The only one that's really a concern to us is the one that's still floating, because in a severe weather event, that might move around enough to undermine underneath the berms. So we keep a close eye on it.
The one that's moving, that's the big 36-inch?
24.
It's the one of the 20s?
It's one of the 20s.
20s, yes.
It's one of the
20s,
Acadians.
yeah.
There was two Acadians, one sunk, and there's only one floating. Now, they've abandoned that.
Yeah, they've
cut it.
banded north and south of the sinkholes, but they haven't cut them off in the sinkhole.
Yeah, it's still floating. We think, we haven't found it, but we think the ones that aren't floating have probably breached and sunk or separated. I mean, the Crosstech was a 36-inch pipe with like 3 inches of concrete on it. And with that kind of span, we did a survey, we had Florida Gas do a survey on that early on, and it showed that good indication that it had a sharp V where it might have breached.
The Florida gas lines, we've got a survey of those and they look broken. So they'll never be returned to operation if that was a concern.
Now, what about, were there any immediate plans for any more ORW wells or pressure wells anywhere in the community or anywhere in the general vicinity here?
We don't have any on the board or on the table right now, and I'll tell you why. When you look at the fleet, when you look at 51 some odd wells, about half of those produced gas, and about 10% of those 51 remain productive. And so, like I've said in the past, we could come in and dot the countryside with ORWs. But chances are we're not going to get any better recovery than we're currently getting out of the good producers that we have right now. And so it's not feasible to us to come in and do that. We think we're gaining on this thing. And I know that there's been comments about the need for pressure monitoring wells, that there's no indication that the pressures are dropping. I've asked the team to hang some of these graphs up here and take a minute to look at them. The red lines are trending down. Those are wellhead pressures. Dennis, last time we met, you asked about well 36. You said, why does it continue to produce at such a rate? Well, what's happening is Tetra Tech and its daily rounds, they're tweaking that thing to keep it flowing at as high a rate as possible. But even that well, if you look at the history of wellhead pressure, it's trending down. So it's going to ultimately do something like these wells are doing. This blue down here, that's OGRW1. That's been our best well. Well, it's about done. And so I think all of the wells out here that are productive, particularly these really high producers, these four right here, will probably follow in that same path. Now, what we proposed as an alternate to pressure monitor wells was to come back in at a future date and repeat some of the CPTs in select areas and see, or confirm rather, if those those gas intervals that we detected in the first round are gone. Our expectation will be that when this is done, when these wells are through venting, we should find that the gas is gone. Okay?
Hopefully so.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
That well on the Bird property, down South Pecan, that it says it's a non-flowing well.
Yeah.
Is that one that y'all plan to, concrete in, seal in, shut down?
It's 38.
Or W38.
Or W38. If I was betting, I'd say that well is done, and it'll probably be among the first that we come in and flood.
Is there a passive well there too? No? That's where they've been pumping out with a vacuum truck.
Right, that's where we did the first water production test on an ORW well.
And did y'all find any subsidence anywhere in the community?
Not to date, not from
Today, no subsidence.
Nothing that we can attribute to water production from that well. We put up a pretty extensive grid all along the well. You probably saw the survey markers. And for a period of, 2 weeks after the water production?
2 weeks before production,
2 weeks
all the way
after.
during production, then 2 weeks after production.
That well,
Dirty water.
that well's never produced any gas. I mean, it's shown pressure a couple of times, and as soon as we open it up, the pressure falls off.
What we really found attractive about that well and why it was selected originally as a well is because it was in an area where we had bubbling and we couldn't understand why it wouldn't produce gas. So we thought, well, if we take this thing and pull that water level down, maybe we can induce flow. It didn't do that.
The bubbling in my pond stopped after they installed that well, I know that.
Is that right?
Yeah. And another thing, I just gotta get, it's just killing me.
Go ahead.
I don't plan on leaving. I don't know what I plan on doing. Anyway, that's besides the point. I know y'all bought these properties, and it's y'all properties, and y'all, I don't know what y'all plan to do with these houses or whatever, but if I'd have sold out, it would freaking kill me to see. I don't care who it is living in my freaking house. I don't give a shit how good of a guy he is. It's just, this is where I belong. And I just couldn't stand to see somebody. I don't give a fuck I don't care if y'all give me $1 million for my place. It would just freaking kill me to see somebody else. And I'm not saying anything bad about you, buddy. It don't matter to me. I'm just telling you how I feel about it.
That's how we are.
It would.
And I can tell
And
you.
I understand that y'all bought the properties, the people settled out, they gone, they done. They're done with this place. But I'm not. I love this freaking place. Thank y'all.
Why don't you sit down and let's
No,
talk to you?
I got to go. I got to go.
I read it.
All right.
Glad to see you.
We understand. We really do. And as I've said many times before, we do things wrong. We make missteps. I think just barging in and saying we're putting people in these homes was probably insensitive. I get that now. I'm hearing that from y'all.
Which
None
you
of us-
also do, you own these places
Right.
now. At one time, supposedly, we were told that it may be green area. I really don't think that's ever gonna happen.
Well, let me give you some history and then I'll ask Bruce to step in because he's much more abreast of the insurance process. When you say we own it, that's still a question. That's still a question. Texas Brine may end up owning these homes if Texas Brine dollars end up
Well, if
in
you
the
don't own
transaction.
them, how can you do this with them?
the
Yeah,
insurance
let me
company.
speak to
The
it.
insurance company.
Let me,
Insurance
Letting
company.
people move into homes, swapping
Well, no.
land for homes and
There's-
all of this other
There's an
crap.
upside. There's an upside to the insurance company owning it. And I'll tell you what it is. If an insurance company has to fork over $150,000, $200,000 to buy a home because of a claim of gas on it, potential hazard, the last thing that insurance company wants to do is sell it to somebody else who can turn around and file another claim. So the logical solution would be, if the insurance companies end up with them, they'll be torn down. Which is unfortunate to see a good home go down. The other thing that you need to know, Texas Brine is not in the business of real estate.
So we've
We've
heard.
heard that many, many times.
Well,
but that's
what
not
would
it
lead you
looks
to
like.
believe that that's not a fact?
What is it? Who owns it?
We've got guys temporarily,
Where's y'all insurance company at?
there's several.
Yeah, Mark, let me speak.
So,
I mean, I
Which
think
one
there's a
owns that
difference
house?
between,
let me let
there's
her
a
say.
difference between him moving in a house, he works here, he has to be here at least 2 or 3 weeks. We get that, okay, he's gonna use one of the houses instead of staying in a hotel. But to transfer or swap a piece of property for a house is, you're selling a house.
Explain it to us. We don't understand that part at all.
Let me speak to what I think your question is. The insurance companies basically provided all the money for the houses, the settlement's done today. We set up a
Settlement's
separate,
done today?
the settlement's done today,
To
the
date.
closing.
To date.
Sorry.
Still something.
Okay, go ahead.
I think there was 68 agreements, I think we've closed on 65 of them, last number I heard. We set up a separate company, subsidiary of Texas Brine, you may see it, Bayou Corne Holdings LLC. It's a wholly owned subsidiary just to get it all in that and make it, it made it much easier to do all the paperwork. So that's who has title. Texas Brine owns Bayou Corne Holdings. So if you see that name, that's where it comes from. Because the insurance company has given and provided the money, and we're not done with this whole response, they have a big say in what happens with the property going forward. And I've stayed up here and said, Texas Brine has no desire to be in the home ownership business long-term. And it would be our intent to demolish them and turn them to green property. That's our intent. But we have to work through the insurance company, and there's a whole lot of issues going on with our insurance companies right now. You all know one of them sued us and said, we don't think we're responsible for any of that. That's a thing that will have to be settled in the courts before we know what kind of insurance coverage we have. We paid in a lot of money in premiums, but now we've got insurance companies that are trying to walk on us. So, when you put all that together, we are even having some challenges getting the insurance companies to reimburse us for the monies we've spent, putting relief wells in, geophone wells in, sinkhole berms. But our owners are committed to continue to stay with it and do the things that we're being directed to do with DNR, and they've told us to do. The insurance company are willing to look at settlements and pipeline claims and stuff like that, but they're reluctant to reimburse us. So before we start a process of demolishing or moving out mobile homes or anything like that, we've committed, and the insurance companies want us to get their input on what should happen. And unfortunately, I've asked numerous times, have not gotten any response from them so far. So that's why there hasn't been any homes demolished yet. And that's why, the only people that we're planning on moving in as workers is in terms of response team, members of the response team.
Oh, really?
Now, in one case, we reached a settlement with one person who owned the property, and the agreement was we swapped a property with him.
Is that okay with everybody? I mean, please keep asking your questions, let's get this over with.
No, we don't think it's fair, but what can
Well,
we do about it? It's a done deal.
I'm not gonna know what your settlement's gonna be, you know what mine is, but.
No, I have no idea what it is.
Well,
We
yeah,
have no idea what
That's
it is.
it, that's it.
What?
That's my settlement. I swapped. So,
Yeah, Talisha,
You know, I
we all trying to make a settlement.
well, that's what I'm
We all trying
saying,
to get
and y'all will.
what we feel is, what we feel we can live with and it is fair.
And that's what
you
I did.
went from owning a $60,000 or $70,000 piece of property to living in a $250,000 house.
That ought to
So
tell you something.
So how's that working for us? It's not.
Well, I think it is, because it's, first of all, showing Texas Brine is not trying to get everybody
Really?
out, like
Yeah, we had heard it
has
wasn't even
been
your
said.
property to begin with. It's
Well,
swapped
you
out.
heard wrong.
Really?
Did you ever come ask me?
I didn't have to.
Why not? Did you
didn't
want to
live
know the
here.
truth?
You did not live here.
Did you want to know if that was my property or not? All you had to do was come ask me.
Nope, didn't have to.
No, because you didn't want to know. But the point is, if they're trying to get everybody out,
We all saw the title.
if they were trying to get everybody out, they would not have let me stay. I wasn't giving my property up. That's the deal I offered to them. You know, I'm not giving my property up. I'm not leaving. You know, they did what was best for them. They did what was best for me. You know, I'm happy with it.
Make that deal.
Well,
Get 3 times what our property's worth.
well, maybe that means you'll get 3 times more. You know, you ought to look at it as a favorable thing.
Let me just say that we know there are some of you that want to and plan on staying. And we're open to discussing with you or your lawyers what kind of agreement we need to reach. We've had some of those discussions with at least one of you. And we currently have the papers being reviewed by the insurance company lawyers. And unfortunately, we can't get the insurance company to find, you know, we've got 6 different insurance company lawyers involved, and it's like pulling teeth to get them to work on it. But we're open to having discussions with anybody that wants to stay to settle your claims too. So that's where, you know, we're at. So I think y'all might be waiting on how the first one turns out, and it may be a model to go by with the others. It may not. I don't know. So that's, you know, we know there's you know, a group of you that want to stay and plan on staying.
But we want to stay as is, not with the restrictions, with everything as it is, not a neighborhood that we can't live in anymore, and we're not happy. It's 2 totally different things.
And we'll just have to see if we can reach an agreement with you that's something that is acceptable to you. And if we can't, we can't, but we'll try.
And one of the things I told them is, please don't let me go through with this deal if you're not going to let all these other people that are trying to stay. I do not want to be back here by myself. And they assured me that they're doing everything they can to let whoever wants to stay, stay.
Well, only the future will tell.
I guess what upsets me, and it's probably nothing to do with Texas Brine, is we keep hearing just for like the restrictions and the vent wells and everything that's been going on. It's like, first thing comes up is, well, we can do it because it's an emergency situation and everything is null and void as far as restriction, whatever. But then they're going to allow people to move in. So it's like, you can move in, but yet your restrictions and whatever else is out the window because it's under an emergency situation, but you're going to let residents move into an emergency situation that never were, no offense, living here before.
Actually, I was living here. I've been living here for 8 years.
She lived in a trailer right here and rented from us.
I mean, I don't.
And she lived
Y'all
here.
all know me. I don't know why y'all insisted on saying that I have not been living here.
I'm just saying, you wasn't a permanent resident here.
I have been a permanent resident for 8 years. I mean, I traveled a lot. I was gone 6, 9 months out of state of the year, but I came home every single.
No sense to you. I'm just trying to figure out why you're letting people. You were living here, but you weren't living here when you made this deal. Is what I'm trying to say, right?
I was evacuated, but no, I stayed almost a year.
You were evacuated, but they let you move back in a different place. No offense. I'm just trying to say it's like the
We all
parish.
trying to
John
figure it out.
Boudreaux
We feeling our way as we go.
I keep getting it thrown in my face by John Boudreaux. It's an emergency situation. That's right. And we, you know, no, you can't do this. We can do this. We can do that. But then.
Well, I guess I look at it like me.
Let me just address.
Let me just say this first, please. Wait. I look at it as no different. Me coming back is no different than people that never left or people that did leave and come back. Why is my situation any different? I mean, they're letting people still live here. They have throughout the entire time. So why is that different than me leaving and coming back? I left only because the Borks sold the property I was renting from. You know, they were taking the buyout. I had to leave because of that. Or I would have never left. I've made that very clear from the beginning. I didn't want to leave. I want to come back as soon as I can. And I was, the whole time I was gone, trying to find somewhere to come back and even rent
while I was gone. And I just feel like as long as they let anybody stay, they can't tell somebody else they can't come back. It's either all or none.
I'll address the mandatory evacuation again. The mandatory evacuation says that there's an imminent risk, and if you choose to stay or come in, that you have taken that risk upon yourself. It's clear in state law, revised statute 29-721. So that still stands. It is a public street. Anyone coming in and living here is assuming the risk if they do not abide by the mandatory evacuation. The other question about covenants restriction, that is not, covenants restrictions is a private individual subdivision issue. The parish doesn't regulate covenants restrictions. That's typically done through something set up when a subdivision is developed. They set up a committee or the owner may be the chairman, but covenants restrictions are not anything that the parish is going to regulate.
But does the parish abide by them, and can we still abide by them even though we're under this mandatory evacuation?
You can abide by them. Understand that there's a lot of cases in covenants restrictions, but also do subdivision for the parish, where the covenants restriction is less restrictive than the parish ordinance. The parish ordinance in subdividing property is the precedence. That's the ordinance. So that has to be abided by. You cannot set up covenants restrictions with less restrictions than the parish already does. So in that case, when a covenants restriction is less, the parish ordinance takes precedence over the covenants restriction. And those cases have come up for side setbacks.
Me when I built my house.
Side setbacks.
Wasn't a
The covenants
big problem.
restriction says 5 feet from the property line. The parish ordinance says 8. So the parish ordinance is what takes precedence. Now, sometimes the parish will do a variance, but still the ordinance is in place, and that is to be abided by.
But what about just the simpleness of keeping your grass cut, keeping the appearance of your house orderly, neat?
That's in the covenants restriction.
So that would be the
No,
neighborhood?
the grass, there is an ordinance for grass, 12 inches. If someone would allow that grass to grow to 12 inches, there's a process though.
Oh, yeah.
You have to get a complaint. That owner has to be sent notice. There's a certain timeline that has to go by before a contract can be brought in. So you have to understand that there are laws and processes. You just have to go do things. You
I
have
know,
to
John, but I
follow all
thought
of
that
it.
was asked at one time, if we could get something to make him cut his grass, and we're told.
We have an ordinance in the parish,
And-
it is a gray area, that it says, mandatory cut your grass over 12 minutes. It doesn't say if you're mandatory evacuated. That's a gray area for us. I never sent Danny a letter. I called him several times to help him cut it. But we kind of falling back on something that's going. I think y'all are losing your objective here. Y'all are accusing us of restrictions and everything. No, the parish. When you say the parish, you're saying me.
I know,
Or John,
I want to
or
live
whoever
on
else.
this street, and I
And
want
we
it to
try-
look just as nice as
I
it does
understand.
now, and then not today, not tomorrow, 5 years, 10 years from now.
I agree.
I don't
The
want to
problem
live in
is,
a junk
when they bought it, now they assume, or the insurance company, they assume that this was residential property, so they have to maintain it.
Exactly.
So if it turned green, they still gotta cut it. If somebody lives in it, they still gotta cut it. I mean, the issues here are when are we be able to lift the mandatory evacuation? Don't y'all think that'd be questions to ask Texas Brine? Like, when the CPT is gonna start again? When we gonna know exactly how much gas been extracted from the aquifer? If it's being recharged, why aren't we pursuing the source?
And that's the
Why
other
can't we do that?
elephant in the room,
We asked the questions.
because Dr. Heacox just said less than a week ago, that the gas is still coming in.
Recharge it.
So
That's the question.
how are we getting all
so
these
many
low,
freaking
low,
questions.
If you'd like to ask Texas Brine that
Yeah.
very question that Dr. Heacox answered, we'll be happy to give you our opinion.
okay.
And it's consistent with what we've said all along. There's no indication of massive volume of recharge. However, there could still be some recharge. But when you look at the sum of all the data, when you look at these depletion curves, when you look at declining pressures, when you look at ORW wells that we've produced that have gone dormant and now won't produce anything, those are indicators that lead us to say that there's not some. And I think that there have been occasions where the seismicity will pick up, things will get kind of active, and it kind of stirs things up. They might release some gas that's stuck in the sediment. So there may be little flurries where you see a little uptick, but there's an overwhelming body of evidence that leads us to conclude there's not recharge taking place. We're confident we're going to get this thing done, and we're confident that your property, your desire to live the way you used to, is going to be restored.
So,
That's why we want people to stay in their homes. We want
Well,
to settle.
I'm glad you have confidence, because we sure don't.
And I understand that, okay? I understand that. We're the evil company from Texas that ruined your lives, right? Go ahead and say it. That's how most of you feel, but you know what? I don't believe that, and I think in time,
Well, I'm glad you
I
don't
think in
believe
time,
it.
you're gonna be grateful that you stayed here, and you're gonna look back and you're gonna say, these folks behaved responsibly, they did everything they could, and this was just a slow process. You can't fix something like this overnight.
Oh, I know that.
so what evidence is Dr. Heacock, what is he using that's different from what y'all are using? I mean, is nobody on the same page? Is DNR not on the same page? Are they not getting y'all?
I won't speak for Gary Hickox, I won't speak for DNR, but I will say this. There has been a significant absence of our team of experts in a lot of the decision-making that's taken place in this process. We've expressed those concerns repeatedly. Okay? If we were working more closely together as a team, I think you would see more consistency in the message. But because we're the evil company from Texas, we don't get to have a seat at the table. Now that's just the cold, hard facts, folks.
Okay, let me respond to that. The governor appointed the Blue Ribbon Commission. The Blue Ribbon Commission, and this is today, so I hadn't even read it yet, has come up with their recommendation to the parish and to DNR as well as DOLCEP of what is the expected outcome before the recommendation of lifting the mandatory evacuation. Everyone in here, the police jury meets every 2 weeks. We're meeting next week. I will once read it and kind of decipher it. I will report it to the police jury next week and invite y'all to come listen. I can't do it right now because it's 162 pages and I hadn't gotten through it yet. So the Blue Ribbon Commission has done that. So encourage you to come next week and hear that.
Let me clarify something about that. Let me clarify something about that. As you know, I'm a member of the Blue Ribbon Committee. And there are two subgroups of the Blue Ribbon.
This is only one of the subgroups.
And this is only one of the two subgroups. The two subgroups are called the gas subgroup, and the other one is considered the stability subgroup, which is, they're talking about the stability of the control itself. And that second group on the stability subgroup has not written their paper on what their expectations are. The gas subgroup has. So let's clarify that.
And just so we're clear, and I don't want to sound like I'm up here slinging mud or being disgruntled, but the fact of the matter is, Texas Brine took enormous measures to get the best, most qualified people from around the world to work on this. They're still with us. Some of them are in the room. I mean, at least a dozen PhDs are on our staff right now working on this problem. And it's been frustrating as hell to be locked out of the process when we know that we have value to add. Can't explain why. Got it off my chest. Done. Now.
All right. I have a question about a specific ORW. And, you know, I've already announced to everybody that I'm a member of the Blue Ribbon Commission. I think you all know that already. I'm not, anything that I say here is my opinion. It's not the Blue Ribbon Commission. Okay. So my question has to do about ORW 38. Mark, you just recently made the comment that you think ORW 38 is done, by which I think you mean it's, you know, you've recovered what little gas you're going to be able to recover from that well. you implied that you were on a path to plug and abandon. So my question, if all that is correct, my question is really for DNR, who has some representatives here. And the question is, what is going to be the process when someone, presumably Texas Brine, comes forward and says they want to plug and abandon not a passive vent well, but an ORW? Because it looks like you may be on a path to one, based on what you said.
We've already plugged some. We plugged some that were on the west side of the sinkhole that we thought was possibly a.
Yeah, but this one, of course, is in a residential area, so presumably it's more sensitive. So my question for the DNR is, what is the process?
Process would be first for them to identify a well, like say if it's 38, to identify a well that they want to plug and abandon. And there's going to be the normal process for say a regular oil and gas well is you want to plug and abandon, you file a permit with and a plan for how you're going to do it with the Office of Conservation. So that would be similar to ensure that it's done safely. But prior to that, in this case, would be making the case that that well has no future value in the response, and depending on what we use to make that case, that would make the determination whether you go on through the process of plug and abandon.
And it's the same process that we've been using all along. Texas Brine, we tell Texas Brine what we need. They propose a plan, and DNR and its consultants review it and approve it or deny it. And in the case of 38, I think we can all agree it didn't produce much gas, if any. I was there when the well was installed. I, was overseeing it. I oversaw EC2, so I know, there was gas on the property at one time. I saw it. The pressure was in EC2. But if Texas Brine proposes to abandon that well, we're going to evaluate years in the future if there's a potential use for it as just put a gauge on it. It's not hurting anything sitting there. If there's no gas in it, there's no danger from it. But we may want to just leave it there for a number of years to see if gas might potentially move there.
Would there be any kind of public involvement, to observe the transparency of this process?
The documents that they submit to DNR and the documents that go back approving or denying, and if they actually go and do some work, the report of the plug and abandonment, that's all public record.
Will there be a hearing?
There's not generally a hearing for a plug and abandonment because where you have, especially with oil and gas wells, the hearing comes when you're getting ready to put one in, and once it's decided and permitted, then the assumption is someday it will be plugged and abandoned, so that's all considered part of the process of installing a well. Now then, recognize that we'll probably be getting the word out.
This, of course, is not quite a production well.
No, it's an environmental issue and it's a public safety issue, and we're going to err on the side of being very conservative. If there's a potential future use of that well, it's going to stay.
Bob, if I can, in early November, we submitted a plan called Phases and Criteria for MRA ORW operation. That basically would take it from a well venting to dewatering to monitoring to doing repeat CPTs and then long-term monitoring and then eventually plugging and abandoning, so that we presented that. I think we've updated and resubmitted at least 2 other times since then. That would be our proposed plan, because we don't want to be too quick to go and plug and abandon a well, because there's things we just don't know, and we want to be able to monitor those wells that we spent this much effort to put in for a period of time to see if any gas shows up again. And if it does, then we return it to venting, or we see if it's ventable gas or if it's just a little bit of pressure. So that's been submitted. To date, we've had very limited or no comments back from DNR on that plan. But that's the process we're doing. So if you see things like moving to phase 3A, that's a process where we would look to move to a well to try a dewatering, which is what we're doing with these ORWs remote from the community, to do low-fold dewatering to see if we can stimulate some more gas flow. So if you hear different phases of ORWs, that's what it's about. But that's the report that we've submitted, and that's what we're marching to until we hear something different.
It's basically our plan or our proposal for the life cycle of the well. It's been submitted, and as Bruce said, we've not had comment back.
I just don't see how y'all doing all this and nobody, the left hand don't know what the right hand's doing.
Well, I know it's a frustrating feel. I lived in a one-street neighborhood that had 30 houses, that everybody was real close. And so I know a little bit about how y'all feel about living here and each other. So I don't know how you feel, but I can imagine. But there's a process that goes on, just like at any site that has this same working. We tell the responsible party what needs to be done. They propose a plan on how to do it. And the regulatory agencies look at that plan, approve, modify, or deny.
So y'all never like sit down at the table and say, what is this, explain it to us. Y'all never just,
Explain to
to each other. He says he has a plan, you get the plan by email, and then you email him back.
Now, we have a
emails you
formal
back,
meeting
and-
every single day with John Boudreaux.
I get that.
It's
I know
responsible
that,
party,
but-
it's DNR, it's DEQ, it's CBNI, it's a formal meeting every day. It's what are we doing today? Here's the plan we're presenting. Travis is usually there, if he's not, he's on the conference call. So we know exactly what everybody's doing
It just seems
every
like,
single day.
We know there is a lot of communication at different levels. Travis and I'm back at Baton Rouge reading everything. Travis is over here looking at everything. CB&I is our eyes and ears, and they're doing things in the field and back at the office and communicating. And Mark, it's just the nature of the process that we're not going to agree on everything. And I don't think y'all are evil, but this just how cleanups happen. It takes longer than anybody would like, but progress is being made, and we're not just rubber stamping things. We're looking at everything on the way to where we need to be, and being they have their experts, and there's a whole army on our side of experts, and we're gonna opt to listen to ours. They have no dog in the fight, except the Blue Ribbon Commission and the folks. We just want to do what's best for you. And Texas Brine may want to do what's best for you, but we can't accept that. We're going to do what we have to do, and if it coincides, it's fine.
I think the biggest problem is that they come up with a plan, you come up with a plan, and the third part in this thing is the people that are involved that live here. And we're the ones that's been left out. And then the only time we know about the plan is when you call a meeting like this, and you dump it on us. We don't have time to even think about it, ask the right questions, and even if we did, it doesn't matter. You're just telling us what you're gonna do. You're not giving us an opportunity to change your mind.
Except for Nick, that's not true. With the whole reason the whole DPVE thing came up and went away was because the community, and you in particular, had a problem with that. That's why that went away. That's why the PVWs, that's why that got shut down.
So we're not in the same system.
But why do you think these people are upset?
I know, but that's pretty unfair to say that, because we were all here at a meeting. We were all here less than a month ago. All this happened in the last month. And for you to say, well, that's why we're not in a Sanchez home, could anybody, like at that meeting, could somebody say, hey, we're thinking about using this as an office? Nobody said that.
I did say it to one person.
How many people?
Wasn't me.
Would you name that person?
Dennis,
No, you didn't tell me that y'all were gonna, you told me y'all were gonna release these two trailers, and you asked me if I was okay with that. You remember my response. But anyhow, no, you never told me about moving into the house.
It didn't say we were gonna move into a home that we purchased.
I'm
You didn't
just
tell me that
saying, you know, from our
Some people already didn't believe me,
perspective,
that's what I didn't wanna hear.
from our perspective, it looks like it's already a done deal
I could
when we
come.
find out about it. And it's not to be ugly, because personally, it doesn't affect us over there.
Can I just say something? Everybody's frustrated. DNR's frustrated, the parish is frustrated, you are frustrated, we're frustrated. This is a frustrating situation. And like we've said many, many times before, Gary Hecox has said it, I've said it, Bruce has said it, we've all said it. There is no playbook for this situation. We couldn't pick up a manual and say, how do we deal with a cavern that has failed and disperse gas across a tight-knit little community in South Louisiana? How do we deal with that? So what we've had to do, please, we've had to learn as we go. And as I've acknowledged many times, we've not been perfect. We've made mistakes. I acknowledge just here tonight that it was a mistake. And I will tell you now, it was a mistake not to tell everybody that we're thinking about moving into another place and getting your buy-in. Okay? Would it have changed things? I don't know. Would it have been agreeable? I doubt it. Are we moving down there? Apparently not. So, we're frustrated. We're all frustrated. And I want to put a final point on the comment I made about the lack of cooperation. It's not to say that DNR is not cooperating or the parish is not cooperating. And I would hope that they would agree that we've been cooperating. The problem has been that you've got two camps. And those camps are up here, and there's brilliant people in both, and there's a disconnect between them. That's what's been frustrating to me.
We're in the middle right here.
We're all in the middle, folks.
But there's three camps. And that's apparently what y'all have forgotten, is the third camp. You know, because, number one, you insist on having community meetings in an evacuated area where the community has said, we're not going to participate in the evacuated area, but you continue to do it anyway. So you really don't want the community to hear what you have to say.
I think the majority of people in this room probably would prefer to have it here than drive to Napoleonville.
Sure, it's convenient. It's convenient. But
Well, no, you just said, we don't, the community doesn't want to have the meetings here. And these, this is like, everybody within the community, pretty much everybody that's still living here. So how can you say the community doesn't want to have the meetings here regardless of what they say?
because I've had them tell me that.
Who? Had who? Who in this room that
I didn't say
faithfully
you-
shows up at every one of these
Did I
meetings?
say anybody in this room? I did not identify anybody at all.
You said the community.
Do you believe that just the people in this room is the community?
I believe most of these meetings here at the trailer have to do with everything that's happening very local, down that street, across the highway, and that's why it's being done here. But the people that show up every one of these single meetings, I think pretty much everybody prefers not to have to travel 13 miles down the
You
road.
don't understand community.
Nick, let me respond. Texas Brine has no desire then, no desire now, to exclude anybody from the communication process. Okay? We came here as an outcome of a public meeting in Napoleonville where we were essentially escorted out of the building by police. I was at the podium, I couldn't get a word in. Do you remember that?
Sure.
Was that constructive? Did that help anybody? So we came here, and what we
What
found.
you have to understand is,
Please, just let me finish. We came here and we developed personal relationships, which is what you guys are begging for. Find out what we want, what we need. Closer setting. It's been productive. This has been productive. That's why we continue to do it. The other factor you have to consider, Nick, is that there's been a significant portion that have settled, moved on, and they're not crowded in here because they don't have an axe to grind. They don't have a status to hear. They elected to move on. We're trying to talk and speak to those of you that want to stay here.
I don't understand.
Well, and you have that right. You have that right. I'd rather you did. I have a feeling, and I may be wrong, but I have a feeling that most everybody that chooses to stay here is gonna look back at this time period and say, I'm sure glad I did that.
And I am
I'm not
happy
convinced.
for anybody who stays because they want to. I am thrilled to death because I know how they must feel, because I know how I feel just knowing that I can't stay.
You know, it's the biggest kicker in all this, and this, I have to say it. Way back years ago, when somebody drilled too close to the edge of the salt dome, I think DNR or whoever reported that obviously nothing was done or whatever, but that's what started this whole commotion. Because somebody did something they weren't supposed to do, and somebody that was supposed to regulate them and stop them didn't do their job. That's it. Does anybody disagree?
Mark, I want to just clear the air about something, because already last week I was accused of being a liar. The other week when we had the meeting, I don't know if anybody else was witness, and you and I talked, and you asked me how you said y'all had plans to move these trailers out. Now, I'm not debating this with you, I'm not fussing you, but if you think you told me that y'all planned to move into little Tony Sanchez's house, I did not hear that, or you did not say that.
I'm not gonna say that I said that, but I do think I said that we're gonna move into property that we own. I think I did say that.
Maybe,
At that time,
I don't recall that.
Mark this, I was there, and those were Mark's exact words. That
We'll
were
move
gonna
into a property.
Yeah, we were
But he didn't
still-
specify what.
He did not say the
We
Sanchez.
were looking at
property.
options, and I had one criteria for Mike and the others, said, guys,
Right.
we don't want traffic going into a home that's off of 70. We wanna be as far away from the community as possible, and obviously we wanna be in a home that has access to 70, and the Sanchez property seemed ideal.
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah, but I just want to clarify, because, some people think, I told some people in my community, in my neighborhood last week, that I didn't know y'all plan was to move into Little Tony's house, and I did not know that. And as evidence, if anybody wants to make a phone call, call Brandon Alamo. Brandon called me the next day, or maybe another day after, and he started talking about restrictions and putting an office, and I said, well, Brandon, I said, my property up front, this property is not subject to the same restrictions as the subdivision. No, that's not what I'm talking about, Mr. Dennis. He said, about them moving into Little Tony's house. I said, what you mean? Well, yeah, they're gonna set up their office in Little Tony's house. So I submit that to everybody. I did not lie. And Brandon will substantiate that story. Because when he called me at first, I thought he was talking about this. I said, why is somebody raising a question about this? Didn't make sense. But anyhow, we're okay with that. But also, I wasn't going to say anything about this, but I will as the developer of this subdivision and as the former chairman of the control committee. And I'm going to ask Bruce and you both, we talked about this many months ago, because I felt it was my place as chairman of the control committee. I asked y'all then, I'm going to ask you now in front of my neighbors and everybody else. What is the intention of Texas Brine? Do y'all plan on coming into our neighborhood and changing any restrictions? Is that y'all plan, to change any restrictions?
No.
Okay, that's what you told me before, and that's never changed. Okay, now,
I'll
y'all
tell you
have
what
that on record, that was discussed before.
I'll tell you what the intention is, and it's the same intention we've had all along. We wanna get your lives back to normal.
Right. And I made it very clear to both of you guys, on behalf of everybody in Sportsman's Paradise, that we want to maintain the integrity of our community the way it is now. We want it to be a nice place to live. And Texas Brine has become our neighbors, so, I did ask y'all then, and you repeated the same thing now. It's not y'all intention to come in and take over and change our restrictions. Okay.
Right. And like I said earlier, the insurance company has concerns about flipping a property that they just paid a settlement on. Well, assuming the Texas Brine's owner said, aha, we've got all these houses down here, maybe we will get in the real estate business. That would be pretty foolish to a wealthy family, selling homes with a known problem, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be kind of setting them up for some claims down the road? So it just doesn't make sense.
They can always.
No, but they have people that would buy them just because they could get them at a good price.
Exactly.
Okay, to clarify something right now, has Texas Brine made the decision to demolish the homes or possibly resell them? And I think I know the answer.
What I've been told by my boss is we're not gonna resell them.
That's what they're saying now?
It is our intent to demolish them. But that's contingent upon getting the insurance companies okay. I wish I could tell you more. I mean, I wish I could get more answers from insurance companies, but it's tough.
I guess the most upsetting thing is the Sanchez property and the guys moving in happened in 1 week and nobody knew anything about it. I mean, it was like dumped on everybody, and like some people said, we come in here every Thursday, we could have said something to them.
Well,
And that was the most upsetting.
That's been a recurring problem for us. I think back to the time when we started the infrastructure project in the neighborhood, we had surveyors go down and put some markings, there was no notification, okay? We have to do better.
Well, it just leads
There's no
to
playbook,
speculation, and we gotta
and
know
let me
that.
tell you how it went down. Our biggest concern was Dennis, because it was gonna have a big impact on his income. These trailers cost a pretty big chunk of dough, so I privately pulled Dennis aside and said, Dennis, we own a lot of property here. We're thinking about pulling out and maybe relocating the control center.
You asked me if I was okay with that, tell them what I said.
You said, well.
I said no.
If I recall, you were a gentleman.
Well, what I followed up with?
You said, well, that's gonna hurt me a little bit, but I'm happy for you. And I went so far as to say, Dennis, our goal is to have your business restored. And I even did not propose that when we get through here, we're gonna have a big crawfish boil or something, and invite all your old customers back and say, well, I'm back in business.
Both of them.
But
if you remember, I followed up and said, hey, I'm a big boy.
Yeah.
Y'all leaving here, I know that day's coming.
Yeah.
I'm prepared for that, so, hey, whatever happens, happens.
But you were a gentleman. But just to finish my point, it went from that meeting that night to the very next day, picking up the phone, talking to Mike, Will, and others, and saying, okay, I think we're okay with Dennis. My bad for not realizing that others would sense that. And I honestly thought of you, but what I thought about was, are they going to be inconvenienced because now they're not going to be able to walk over to the command center for meetings? Because a lot of you folks walk in from your homes. That was up. So we were thinking of you. We just weren't thinking in the terms that you described. So, we're not perfect.
We're not gonna be sad to see y'all go, I'm gonna tell y'all right now.
That hurts.
I would love to see this place back to like it was.
And it can be. I'm an optimist, and I'm confident that this problem will not last forever. It won't last forever. Look at the data. We're getting ahead of it.
And I'm not 20 years old anymore either, so. How long,
Those wells that are declining,
Take care.
are you sure that the screens aren't blocked?
Yes. I mean, we still go around and do our routine water removal. We're still going to rig up on some of them and see if we can enhance gas flow by pulling the head down, reducing the head. Just because they're dormant now doesn't mean that they don't have some future utility. But what you look at in a gas well is you look at a trend. A clogged up perf or something like that generally occurs like that. It can. These are trends. These are depletion trends. These are gas pressures and pockets that are depleting. And that's what gives us encouragement. That's what leads us to conclude that we're going to get this thing done. And in my heart of hearts, I really do believe there's going to be a significant portion of people, maybe you're one of them, Nick, I hate to single you out, but there's going to be some people that are going to look back and say, there's still a lot of folks living down here. I love that little place. I don't know why I left.
Well, I'll always know why. I'll always know. Now, the pressure well, are they still maintaining pressure?
Look at the red lines on all of these producing wells. They're trending down.
I'm talking about the pressure.
There are some wells. There are some pressure monitoring wells that still remain elevated. But for the life of me, I don't understand how anybody can say that they can understand what those wells are saying when you have a water column in a well that moves up 2 or 3 feet a day. So in our view, and we argued this, we haven't been formally told that the argument is bad, but our view is there's no value in a bunch of pressure monitoring wells. What determines the end is when the gas is no longer produced. And that's our basis. So what we offered as an alternative was subsequent CPTs, where we can go in and look and see if gas zones are depleted or minimized.
So what are you doing CPTs?
Well, we're waiting until we finish the dewatering, because we don't want the dewatering testing to impact the outcome of the CPTs. We want the CPTs to come in where we can select areas where we've had 1 or 2 ORWs that are done, and we can punch a CPT and say, confirm, no gas. Go back to the record where, 6 months ago, we had a CPT in the same area, and we had a 3-foot column. That's the kind of information we're looking for. But we want to do it incrementally, and we want to get the dewatering testing completed before we start that process.
Right.
Would the CPTs still show a significant amount of gas?
Then our work's not done. But what if the CPTs show some gas, and all the surrounding ORWs are unable to produce? Is our job complete? We've already had some pretty smart folks say that about 1/3 of the gas is probably going to stay in the water, dissolve, and it'll eventually disperse. So there is some possibility that we will never get all of the gas. We may find ourselves putting CPTs down and seeing reductions, but not total eliminations. I think the bigger picture is, what are the producing wells doing? Have we taken them down to the extent that they're no longer able to produce gas? And in our view, once we've accomplished that, whatever risk existed for homeowners here is essentially gone.
My question to DNR would be, if this gas is down there and 51 wells, only about 10% of them are working now, you said?
Well,
if we can't suck it up, how long are we going to keep trying versus just saying it's not coming up? If we can't suck it up, why are we so worried about it coming up on its own?
Because the fact is, because it hasn't come up last year or last month in a concentration enough to where somebody gets hurt or a house, we have an explosion or a fire, doesn't mean it won't be tomorrow or next week.
Why not just go in some kind of monitoring mode then? And then start things back up again?
That gas is not supposed to be there. From DNR's perspective, it's got to be drawn down to a point where there is some consensus.
Patrick, with all due respect, I'm not going to argue with you.
Yeah.
The gas in the ground is natural. Would you agree?
Define natural.
It's swamp gas. There's mixes of thermogenic and biogenic. Not every molecule in the grass or in the gas in the ground out here is the result of our sinkhole. What you just said implies that it is. At some point, folks are going to have to realize, I've got gas under my ground, but I live in an area that naturally produces gas. I'm not all that concerned about it.
Up to a point, but there's more gas there than.
Can I suggest something to people? I've seen this. How many pages did you say that thing was from the Blue Ribbon Committee? 162. Well, I've read that for the last 2 or 3 months, okay, and earlier versions of it. There are other people in this room who have also seen it. And it's just been sent to John. Presumably, Texas Brine must have just got a copy of it.
We haven't.
All right, you haven't seen it yet.
We got it.
Obviously,
I just got it today, so.
Obviously, if there was total agreement, it wouldn't take 162 pages to say, yes, we agree. Now, I'm not at liberty, it's not my role, I'm not going to attempt to say, that's not what the point is. But obviously, the answer is not, yes, we agree with everything. So there's going to be a lot that, the questions that we have are sort of in there. And it's going to take all parties a substantial period of time to kind of resolve what is going to happen.
And back early in the
I would
process-
just suggest we don't all wring our hands about this.
Back
We'll never
early in
get
the
done.
process of the Blue Ribbon Commission, Texas Brine agreed that they would abide by whatever the Blue Ribbon Commission came up with. That report, by design, went from the Blue Ribbon Commission to Secretary Schutz, Commissioner Wells, John Boudreaux, and
Kevin Davis.
That's the first step. That's who the Blue Ribbon Commission reports to. The next step is for that to go out to all the other agencies and then to Texas Brine. I don't know the time frame. But the Blue Ribbon Commission has taken everything that Texas Brine has proposed, everything that our own experts have input into the system, and the Blue Ribbon Commission on the gas side has come up with, this is it. And the governor appointed the Blue Ribbon Commission, and Texas Brine agreed in the early stages that they would abide by the direction. So that's where we are.
Hey, Don, let me make a comment on that. Early on, I was the one that committed to Secretary Schutz, we would follow the BRC. I also, though, asked if Texas Brine could have a seat at the table, not as a voting member, but to listen and hear everything saying, because we have such a wealth of data. I've been told on probably not less than 4 occasions, we would not, that would not be allowed. All I ask for is transparency.
And the transparency is that the Blue Ribbon Commission has taken all the information, all the data from all the sources, and they've come up as, you know, the best minds in the business that have the experience from salt domes and rock mechanics and gas migration, and they've come up with what they consider to be the path forward to protect your lives and to protect your liberty, being able to be released from this evacuation order and to get back to the pursuit of happiness of what y'all had before this started. That's in the Declaration of Independence, and that's also what we're doing. We're protecting lives.
Why wouldn't y'all let them be on what he's asking? Why wouldn't y'all let them have a seat on that table, not as a voting member? You know, it almost seems like, I mean, y'all have drawn this line.
I think the governor wanted it to be as independent as possible. And in the discussion of that, the members were selected, and if you recall, also at that time they asked to have a community member as well, and that's when originally J.C. Chamberlain was the original community member, and then Bob came in later on in the process. I'm not sure how in August. So it was selected by the governor to be an independent committee to evaluate and to provide assistance to us and GOSEP as the coordinating agencies to bring in these experts, and they have, and it's been a long time. They've been working quite some time gathering data as well as going over some of the proposals that Texas Brine has made, and now the gas side has produced their report, and the stability side is going to have one forthcoming. And like I said, I just got it today, and I just started to review it. I'll report it to the police jury this next week, so I invite everyone to come to that. And we are going to start meeting in the next week or so with all the regulatory agencies, not just DNR, but all the rest of the regulatory agencies, and they can all provide input of their part of that report, and that'll be the path forward.
And to respond to you, the Blue Ribbon Commission did allow Texas Brine to present their opinions on stability and gas issues and pressure monitor wells and the path forward, and all that was considered. But the decision, was left up to the Blue Ribbon Commission on how much input they wanted, how much they needed. They looked at all the data. There is literally, I can't imagine how much data there is on the data collection centers on every day's activities and every well. All that was considered. And what they wanted to do was consider the facts, and they were charged with making the decision. They did not want to be influenced by the responsible party.
Well, I don't hear him asking to be able to have a say in what's going on, but to have input directly from the horse's mouth, and mainly just to hear you know, like he said, transparency, but it's almost
We've had
like,
volumes of input.
No, come on, Patrick.
How many
Are you kidding me?
All the information you'll
Are
pass
you,
to the
do you wanna
RD.
speak for the last time we asked for an audience and what we were told?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's already said it. Early on,
If you're
right
talking about
after.
discussion, I'm talking about data, information, talk about all this information producing.
We've
That's what
had
fed the RD.
we've had 2 or 3 opportunities.
All right, hold on. All right. As the independent party, I see this tennis match going quite a bit.
We can
On
come
the government
forward.
side,
Wait, no, we like.
they can argue this later in court. That's a non-issue.
let me just, my reasoning for
The
questioning.
non-issue is.
Got anything else?
Happy
Yeah,
reading. Happy reading.
I got one more question.
Please do it next week.
Charlie, nice to meet you.
Go ahead. My reason just for questions is because just like she said, right hand don't know what the left hand is doing, and it seems like that's coming out why.
The next time that y'all get a measurement on the sinkhole, would you make sure that the new south berm shows up in that drawing? Because what I've seen so far is,
Next time we
You're
do
not
it,
leaving.
so